The auctioneer's voice sliced through the stale summer air of my father's old barn. Lot 14. Solid walnut dresser. Bidding starts at 200. 200. For my mother's dresser. I stood at the far end of the crowd, half hidden behind a column of rusted gardening tools, watching strangers raise numbered paddles while my stepmother, Denise, hovered proudly beside the auctioneer like a queen surveying her kingdom. Her kingdom. That word caught in my throat. Because none of it, belonged to her. Not the antique dresser whose drawers still smelled faintly of lavender sachets. Not the carved bed frame my father built with his own hands when he and my mother were newly married. Not the house. Not the land. Not the farm that had been in my family for 4 generations. But Denise smiled as if everything on that ground, including the people, belonged to her now. I folded my arms tightly, keeping my breath even. On the outside, I looked like a quiet, aging woman simply observing. On the inside, I was every year of my 62 years sharpened into a single, deliberate point. A man near the front raised his paddle and the crowd murmured approval. The auctioneer barked numbers that climbed higher and higher. Denise laughed at something whispered in her ear. She had always laughed too loudly, like she needed the world to hear her happiness, even when it was stolen. I watched her lean on the dresser, her manicured hands smoothing the polished surface as if it were hers to bless. She was wearing one of my father's rings, too large for her finger, spinning each time she gestured. She must have found it after he passed, tossed in a drawer that hadn't been hers to open. A low hum pushed through the crowd as the bidding peaked. Sold, the auctioneer declared, striking his gavel down. The dresser was hauled away like an injured animal, its legs dragging across the gravel. A piece of my mother's memory carried off to the back of a stranger's truck. Denise didn't blink. I should have been trembling with rage. I should have been shouting. I should have been grabbing every item and dragging it back into the house. But I stayed silent. Because 2 nights earlier, under the dim light of my father's old desk lamp, I had opened a sealed envelope my father had hidden in his safe. An envelope addressed to me. Inside was a single document, crisp and undeniable. The deed. The deed to the house, the farm, and all the surrounding acreage, signed over to me nearly 3 years ago. Well before the illness took his mind. And well before Denise thought she could claim everything. So I stood there watching her sell furniture she didn't own, confident and oblivious. But I wasn't angry. I was patient. Because today, Denise believed she was gaining control. She didn't realize she had already lost. And she certainly didn't see me walking toward her, the folded deed tucked securely in my bag. I stopped several feet behind her as she queued up the next item, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. Next, we have the dining table. A family heirloom. She didn't finish. Because that was the moment she finally noticed me. And the color began to drain from her face. She saw me holding something she never expected to see again. My name is Margaret Lane, though most people call me Maggie now. I turned 62 this past spring. An age that sits comfortably on me, not heavy, not fragile. Just earned. I have my mother's calm temperament and my father's stubborn spine, a combination that has baffled more than a few people who thought I could be pushed around. Denise learned that late. Far too late. As she stared at me that day in the barn, her expression flickering between irritation and unease, I felt a strange peace. I hadn't intended to attend the auction, not at first. Grief can freeze a woman's legs, and my father's death just 6 weeks ago had left a hollow inside me I still didn't know how to fill. But grief can also heat the blood. Especially when disrespect is added to the fire. I grew up on this farm. Every inch of its soil knows my footsteps. The creek behind the house, the sagging porch swing, the pear tree leaning like an old drunk near the fence, they all contain pieces of my life. This land held my childhood laughter, my mother's voice singing while hanging linens, my father's low whistle whenever he surveyed the fields at sunset. And then, one day, Denise walked in. My father married her 8 years after my mother passed. He was 70. She was 48. And I was cautious. Cautious because grief makes older men lonely, and loneliness makes them foolish, and foolishness attracts women like Denise. But I tried. I really did. I tried to welcome her. To believe she cared for him. To trust the smooth, practiced gentleness she displayed like a well-rehearsed performance. She adored my father, so long as he was healthy, generous, and easily influenced. When his illness came, her affection thinned the way frost recedes in sunlight. I saw it all. I witnessed the impatience. The sighs. The way she managed to avoid responsibility while still boasting about being his closest companion. It was as though she loved the title of wife more than the man himself. And what she loved most was the idea of inheriting everything. She thought I would step aside. That I would mourn quietly, let her arrange her future using the pieces of my past. But she never bothered to understand me. She never learned that I am not a woman who folds easily. As the auction continued around us, people shuffling, items clattering, the murmur of transactions blending into a discordant hum, I stood still, letting Denise feel the weight of my presence. She approached me, her smile too tight. "Maggie," she said. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I know," I replied calmly. "But I needed to witness this." Her eyes flicked to my bag, then back to my face. "Everything is perfectly legal," she said quickly. "Is it?" I asked. A bead of sweat formed at her hairline. She didn't know yet. She suspected, but she didn't know. She didn't know that my father had trusted me with more than memories. That he had anticipated the very greed she thought she concealed. She didn't know that the power she believed she held was dissolving under her feet. Not yet. But she was about to. Denise asks what's in my bag, and I tell her it's something that will stop the auction cold. I didn't open the bag right away. That would have been too easy for her. Too merciful. Instead, I let the question settle between us, thick as humidity. "What's in there, Maggie?" she asked again, softer this time, almost pleading under the false brightness. "A reminder," I said, "of what truly belongs to this family." The word family landed heavily. Denise's jaw twitched the way it always did when she felt cornered. When my father first introduced her to me, he had used his proud but nervous voice, the same one he used when he showed off a risky project he wasn't sure would stand upright. He told me she was kind, organized, attentive. A widow who understood loneliness. A woman who made him feel young again. I wanted to believe him. I really did. Because my father, gentle, practical, slow to anger, deserved companionship in his later years. And for a time, she played the part well. She brought baked goods to family gatherings. She listened to his stories with exaggerated delight. She complimented me with sugary phrases sprinkled like powdered sugar, sweet enough to coat, never enough to nourish. But she never slipped past my mother's memory. She hovered around it, jealous, territorial, as though I carried a ghost she couldn't control. As my father aged, I visited more often. I helped with medication schedules, doctor visits, financial organization. And every time I came, Denise acted inconvenienced, as though my presence forced her to perform the role she claimed to relish. I caught her once in the pantry, whispering sharply to someone on the phone about how exhausting it was to take care of an elderly man. I had stepped back before she noticed me, a stone settling quietly in my stomach. My father didn't see it. Love had softened his edges, blurred the details. But family sees what outsiders don't. Family knows when a throne is being built behind closed doors. As we stood near the barn, the auctioneer announced another item, my father's workbench, nicked and dented, smelling faintly of cedar dust. A man bid quickly. Denise clapped delightedly, not even glancing at the bench she had never once seen him use. My throat tightened. "That's enough," I said. She looked at me sharply. "Excuse me?" "Denise, this property isn't yours to sell." Her posture stiffened, but her eyes flickered. It will be. The will. The will was made 4 years ago, I cut in quietly. Before his diagnosis. So, she snapped. So, I said, he made another arrangement. One you didn't know about. Her breath hitched, just slightly. Until I'd learned to read the way some people read weather shifts. What arrangement? She whispered. I finally slid my hand into the bag and touched the envelope. Not yet. Timing is everything. The one he trusted me to reveal only when necessary, I said. The crowd applauded behind us, oblivious. Denise swallowed hard, and for the first time since meeting her, she looked afraid. Denise announces to the auctioneer that the sale will continue, but I step onto the platform and interrupt the event. I stopped the auction with nothing more than a raised hand. The auctioneer faltered mid-sentence. The crowd turned. Denise froze as if she'd been pinned beneath a spotlight. Sorry to interrupt, I said, stepping onto the platform. But before this sale continues, there's something everyone here needs to hear. Denise rushed forward, her whisper a hiss. Maggie, don't you dare. I pretended not to hear her. I'm Margaret Lane, I said to the auctioneer and the crowd. Daughter of the late Thomas Lane. This property, everything being sold today, has a legal complication that must be addressed before another item is removed. The auctioneer frowned. Is there a dispute over ownership? Yes, I said. And it's substantial. A ripple went through the room. Denise forced a brittle smile. She's confused, she insisted. Grief can do that. Everything is in my late husband's will. Is it? I asked. Her nostrils flared. The betrayal that led us here hadn't happened today. It began long before my father passed, long before Denise stepped into the role of grieving widow. It began with her slow, calculated attempt to edge me out of the family picture. Last year, while sorting paperwork for my father's medical treatments, I discovered Denise had quietly redirected some of my father's accounts. Small withdrawals, masked as routine expenses. But they added up. Thousands missing over the course of 18 months. When I confronted her, she cried. Not delicate tears, extravagant sobs, as if performing an opera. She claimed she mixed up accounts, that caregiving was overwhelming, that everything she did was, for the family. My father, frail and fogged by illness, begged me to forgive her. I did not. I simply paused the battle. Because I had already found the pattern. The same pattern she used on her first husband, who had left her their house, only for her to sell it within months and move on. The same pattern she used with her second partner, a man who died mysteriously and whose belongings she auctioned off before the funeral flowers had wilted. My father had become her next pattern. Except she hadn't anticipated one thing. Me. While she was burying my father beneath compliments and staged affection, my father was leaving something else buried for me. The deed. When he fell ill, he told me, during one lucid evening, that he wanted the land protected. He didn't want Denise to change it, sell it, gut it for profit. He trusted her for companionship, but he trusted me with legacy. He signed the deed transfer quietly, filed it legally, sealed the documents, and hid them in his safe. And he told only one person. Me. Now Denise watched, her face paling as I reached into my bag. This auction, I said slowly, is being conducted under false pretenses. Maggie, she snapped, you have no right. I have every right. I pulled out the envelope. Her breath caught. This, I said, changes everything. The crowd leaned forward. The auctioneer blinked. Denise stumbled back, shaking her head. No, she whispered. You can't have that. You're lying. But she already knew she was wrong. I opened the envelope, only to reveal something that shocks not just Denise, but the entire room. The paper made a crisp sound as I unfolded it, the barn falling silent except for distant birds and the shifting of hay beneath people's boots. This, I said, holding up the document, is the legally recorded deed to this property. Transferred to me by my father 3 years ago. A collective murmur broke out. The auctioneer lowered his gavel. Denise swayed as if struck. No, you doctored that, she rasped. Thomas would never give you everything. He trusted me with what belonged to our family long before you arrived, I replied. Maggie, please, she gasped, reaching for the paper. Let me see it. I pulled it away. You'll see it when the sheriff arrives. Her lips parted. The sheriff? Yes, I said. I called him before I drove here. Another wave of whispers swept the crowd like wind through wheat fields. Denise's mask cracked. You can't prove anything. I almost felt sorry for her, not for her cruelty, but for her underestimation of me. Because in the last few weeks, while she was planning this auction, I had been conducting my own investigation. I'd hired an estate attorney, a calm, sharp-eyed woman named Jacinda, recommended by a friend. Together, we reviewed every financial action Denise had taken over the past 5 years. We uncovered unauthorized withdrawals, forged signatures, and a trail of emails she believed she'd deleted. Jacinda built a tidy dossier. A dossier that now sat safely in my car. But that wasn't all. I had gone to the courthouse. I confirmed the deed was indeed transferred, notarized, and filed. Denise had no legal claim to the property unless I chose to grant her one. I would not. She had tried to dismantle a legacy for personal gain. She had tried to erase my mother's memory. She had tried to sell my family's home out from beneath me. No. The sheriff's cruiser pulled up outside just as the tension peaked. People stepped aside, creating a path through the crowd. Denise's voice trembled. Maggie, you're blowing this out of proportion. I looked at her evenly. You tried to sell property you do not own. That is fraud. She opened her mouth to argue, but the sheriff, a tall man with a quiet, authoritative presence, approached. Afternoon, ladies, he said. We have a report of a disputed estate sale. Denise rushed toward him, words tumbling out. Sheriff, she's lying. I have the will. The property defaults to me. I waited until she finished. Sheriff, I said clearly, handing him the deed. This document supersedes the will regarding real property. It is legally binding. He examined it carefully. Then he looked at Denise. Ma'am, he said, this appears valid. Her knees buckled. No, she whispered. She can't do this. But I wasn't done. Sheriff, I continued, I'd also like to file a report for attempted fraudulent sale and possible misappropriation of funds from my father's accounts. Denise's head snapped toward me, eyes wide with terror. You, how dare you? How dare I? I stepped closer. How dare you? Her breath quickened. The sheriff held up a calming hand. Let's all stay civil. I took a slow breath. I am civil, I said. That is why this will not become a spectacle. But it already had. Cliffhanger, the sheriff asks Denise to step aside for questioning, and she makes a desperate move no one expects. Denise bolted. It shocked everyone, the sheriff, the crowd, even me for a heartbeat. She lunged off the platform, nearly knocking over a couple in the front row, and sprinted toward the house. The sheriff muttered something under his breath and took off after her. People parted like water around them, gasping, whispering. Someone tried to follow, but I raised a hand, stopping them. Let her run, I thought. Running only deepens guilt. I walked after them at a measured pace, my step steady, as though the ground itself would not dare shift beneath me. By the time I reached the porch, Denise was attempting to force the door open with frantic, trembling hands. The sheriff approached cautiously behind her. Ma'am, he said, you need to step away from the door. She ignored him, fumbling with the handle, then pounding her fist on the wood. She can't take this from me, she yelled. She can't. She already has the deed, the sheriff said gently. Running won't change that. Denise spun around, tears streaking her mascara. I took care of him, she snarled. Where was she? Visiting on Sundays? Dropping off casseroles? I stared at her. I was with him every week. Sometimes every day. I arranged the caregivers you regularly dismissed. I organized the medications you forgot to give him. That's not true, she screamed. But it was. And she knew it. You were supposed to take care of him, I continued, my voice level. Instead, you took advantage of him. The sheriff stepped between us. All right. Let's lower the temperature. I nodded, because anger was not my tool. Clarity was. Denise slumped against the doorframe, breathing hard. You don't understand, she whispered. I needed this. I gave up everything for him. No, I said quietly. You invested, expecting a return. Her shoulders shook. For the first time, I saw the truth, she wasn't just greedy. She was desperate. A woman who treated relationships like lifeboats. Who clung until she drained them dry. But her desperation did not erase her choices. The sheriff approached her cautiously. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning. Voluntarily, for now. She looked up at him, her face twisted in fury and ruin. You think I'm going to let her win? She spat, jerking her head toward me. This isn't about winning, I said softly. This is about what's right. She lunged again, this time toward me. The sheriff grabbed her arm before she reached me, holding her firmly as she thrashed. Let me go, she shrieked. Enough, the sheriff said sharply. This is your last warning. But the fight drained out of her suddenly. Her body went limp, her voice collapsing to a whisper. You ruined everything. No, I said, meeting her eyes. You did that yourself. He guided her toward the patrol car. Denise didn't resist this time. She simply stared at the ground, her breath coming in shuddering, defeated waves. I watched her go, not with triumph, but with the quiet ache of someone watching consequences settle like dust after a long storm. I turned toward the barn. The crowd waited, hushed. The auctioneer looked lost. And I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Resolve. This ends today, I said to myself. As the sheriff secures Denise, he tells me something he discovered in her car, something far worse than the auction. The sheriff approached me again, his brow furrowed. Denise sat in the back of the patrol car staring at her hands, no longer crying, no longer pleading, just hollow. Ms. Lane, he said quietly, there's something you should know. I braced myself. We searched her vehicle, he continued. Found a folder with bank records, property listings, and communications with a realtor in another state. Looks like she was planning to liquidate everything quickly and move. My stomach tightened. How quickly? He exhaled. Within the next 2 weeks. The barn suddenly felt too small, the air too tight. She had wanted to erase the farm, its history, its bones, its stories, in exchange for a clean slate and a hefty sum. But instead, the ground she tried to sell out from under me would be the ground she lost footing on. What happens now? I asked. Well, he said, glancing toward the car, there's enough here for a full investigation. Fraud. Attempted unlawful sale. Possible elder financial abuse. The district attorney will decide how far it goes. I nodded slowly. Denise looked out the window at me. Her face was a storm of disbelief and panic. But I didn't look away. She had gambled her future on my silence. She had lost. The sheriff tipped his hat. We'll take it from here, Ms. Lane. I'll call once we've processed everything. As the cruiser pulled away, the auctioneer approached timidly. Should we cancel the sale? It's already canceled, I said gently. These items belong here. They're staying. The bidders dispersed, some whispering, others offering sympathetic nods. a few apologized for bidding, though they hadn't done anything wrong. I slipped back into the barn, running a hand over the old workbench, the dresser, the dining table. Their familiarity soothed me. But there was still one last thing to do. I retrieved the dossier from my car and drove to the attorney's office. Jacinda reviewed everything with sharp, approving eyes. "You were incredibly thorough," she said. "The DA will have a field day with this." "I don't want revenge," I said quietly. "Just justice." "Justice," she replied, "is its own kind of revenge. And a cleaner one." She prepared the final documents, securing the property fully in my name, protecting it from any future dispute. The weight in my chest lightened for the first time in months. By the time I returned home, the sun was setting behind the fields. The land glowed gold, warm, forgiving. I walked through the house, touching familiar surfaces, breathing in memories. Everything was still intact. Everything had survived the attempted theft. I went to my father's old desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out the photo of him and my mother, young, smiling, unburdened. "I kept it safe," I whispered. And I felt, for the first time, that he knew. As night falls, I receive an unexpected phone call from the sheriff. "Denise has made a statement, and it involves me directly." The phone rang just after 9, its sharp sound cutting through the quiet of the house. I recognized the sheriff's number immediately. "This is Maggie," I answered. "Ms. Lane," he said, his tone careful, "I wanted to update you. Denise has given a statement." I sat down slowly. "What did she say?" "A lot," he replied. "Most of it emotional, but some of it, revealing." I waited. "She admitted she planned to sell the property," he said. "She claims she needed the money because she was in significant debt before marrying your father." That didn't surprise me. "She also said," he continued, "that she resented you. That she felt you judged her, that you never gave her a real chance." I closed my eyes. "I tried." "I'm sure you did," he said gently. He paused. "There's one more thing. She asked for you. Specifically." My eyes opened. "Asked for me?" "She said she wanted to apologize. Wanted you to hear her out. But given the circumstances, that won't be possible until this goes through the proper channels." I exhaled slowly, a blend of relief and sorrow. "Thank you for telling me." After I hung up, I sat in the dim living room for a long moment. The house felt heavier now, not burdened, but deeper somehow, as if absorbing everything that had transpired. Justice had begun its work. Not loudly, not vindicatively. Quietly, inevitably. The way truth always settles. Over the next few days, life returned to a gentle rhythm. I restored the furniture to its rightful places. I walked the perimeter of the farm, reacquainting myself with the land. I sorted papers, donated items, cooked simple meals, and let the silence loosen the knots inside me. Grief softened. Anger cooled. And the farm breathed easier, as though grateful to be reclaimed. A week later, Jacinda called. "It's official," she said. "Your ownership is uncontested. Denise has no claim. The DA is likely to pursue charges." I thanked her. Her competence had been a steady anchor through turbulent waters. That evening, I stood on the porch watching the sky turn violet. A warm breeze rustled the pear tree. Fireflies blinked along the fence line. My father used to say the land speaks to those who listen. Tonight, it spoke clearly. "This is yours. This is home. This is safe again." I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and sat in the old rocking chair. The boards creaked familiarly beneath me. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel sorrow for Denise, not for what she lost, but for what she had never learned to treasure. She could have been part of this family. She could have been loved. She could have belonged. But belonging requires honesty, loyalty, respect. She gambled those away. And now, the outcome had arrived. Days later, I receive a letter from Denise, written before her arrest, and inside it, I find a revelation I never expected. The letter arrived in a plain envelope without a return address. The handwriting was unmistakably Denise's, loopy, dramatic, pressing too hard into the paper. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight warming the wood, and opened it. The letter was short. Maggie, if you're reading this, then everything has already happened. I know you think I'm a monster. Maybe I am. But I wasn't always. I loved your father. Not perfectly, but genuinely. I just didn't know how to share him, with his illness, with the past, or with you. I was terrified of disappearing. Desperate people do foolish things. I'm sorry, truly, for hurting you, for taking what wasn't mine, and for betraying a man who never deserved it. I hope someday you can forgive me, even if only in silence. Denise. I folded the letter carefully. Her words didn't excuse her actions. They didn't restore trust, or undo the harm. But they revealed something I hadn't expected. She had known she was losing long before she ran. I placed the letter in a drawer, not to treasure, but to acknowledge. There is value in knowing the full truth, even when it arrives late. And then life continued. I tended the garden. I repaired the fence. I invited neighbors for tea. Slowly, the farm regained its rhythm, and so did I. One evening, I stood overlooking the fields, their green waves rolling under the breeze. My father's land. My family's history. My responsibility now. Revenge didn't rebuild this place. Truth did. Documentation did. Courage did. Calm confrontation did. Ethical revenge isn't about destruction. It's about restoration. It's about standing firm when someone tries to move the foundation beneath you. It's about choosing justice over fury, clarity over chaos. As the sun dipped low and fireflies shimmered like scattered stars, I felt something settle inside me. Peace. I touched the porch railing, the wood warm under my palm. Dad, I whispered, I kept the promise. And in the hush of the evening, I felt, more than heard, his approval. Moral: protect what is yours with integrity. Fight deception with truth. And remember that real justice doesn't shout, it stands quietly, unwavering, until the world can no longer look away.